This is a live podcast that we're recording. We record this every Monday night. I'm here with my friend Collin. We met on TikTok and we meet every Monday night and we drink two different teas side by side, or not side by side, but we just drink two different teas and talk about the terroir, talk about where it comes from, talk about our impressions on the tea, and try to make some type of educational discovery about tea through this process. And so these pairings are parallels, they're contrasts, and they're complements to each other. And so today we are drinking two broken grade black teas. Now I thought this would be interesting, Colin, because we've talked about this before. You've talked about, like the broken grades kind of being a lower grade, and it's for the most part true. Like when it comes to like CTC, Fanning's dust, a lot of times those are lower grades, but broken grades can also be made on an artisanal level like
True.
these tonight that we'll look at. So we're going to be looking at one from Malawi, Africa, and another one from Sri Lanka.
Wait, what?
It's from Sri Lanka. I said Vangeti Peko, right?
Oh, no.
Or did I do the Satemwa?
You did the Satemwa TSFBOP1 and the Thiolo TSFBOP1. I can go see if I have that other one real quick.
I think that would make the conversation more interesting. I'm sorry I made that mistake.
You're okay. Let me go check real fast.
Yeah, you have that Vangeti Peko. Yeah, let's do that one. That'll be a good contrast. Colin and I both have very busy schedules, so the planning for this podcast is limited in capacity, but grateful to have you all here. My name is Elyse. I am a tea importer. I've been doing tea importing for close to a decade now. I run a software company that is a B2B marketplace between independent tea growers and tea business buyers. So for the most part, I do wholesale, so just kind of back end supply chain. Did you get it?
Yes. Which Malawi one are we doing then?
Let's do the Cholo one.
The which one?
The Cholo.
Cholo. Oh, is that how you pronounce that?
Yes.
Good to know.
It always trips people out because they call it Thiolo. It's spelled Thyolo. Thiolo is what it looks like, but in the local language there, it's Cholo, and that's like the district that they're in. It's called the Cholo district, which is why they call it that.
Okay, let me measure this out.
Oh, you're so exact. I don't measure mine.
I
eyeball it.
I measure on my first go of a tea, and by the way, I've got the live symbol on, so we are recording now. If you're up for it. And this might be a good way to start off our conversation too. When I'm first making a tea, I like to measure out exactly, and then kind of pay a lot of attention. I'll often write down as well, kind of what I did. So the next time I come back to this, I can experiment on that, and I remember that. And I've met a lot of people recently that don't do that. Such as yourself, which is totally valid, obviously, because who cares how you make tea as long as you're enjoying it. But for me, that's a much more enjoyable process because growing up, my mother was a math teacher, so everything was basically a science experiment half the time. So that's kind of one of the enjoyment of trying a tea for the first time for me is kind of getting to play with the measurements a little bit and get to know.
Yeah, no, I get that. I support it. I think it's cool. I've brewed and drank these teas dozens of times.
Yeah. The teas that I know, I never pull the scale out for.
Yeah, because you just know, you have an intuition for it, and that's the theme of the tea education that I'm always trying to put out in our content is more about intuition than it is about exactness and memory and
getting to know your tea.
Perfect. Yeah, know your tea. And the best way to do that is just by drinking the teas, especially if you're drinking teas as a pairing, like how we are.
True.
It's really helpful. So yeah, sometimes we're drinking teas coming from the same place. They're just different teas coming from the same garden, or sometimes like today, they're the same type of teas coming from very different gardens and having very different stories of how those tea styles were developed.
I have warm teaware.
You have what?
I have warm teaware.
What's your one tea wear for tonight? Oh, so
No,
you wanna
I
we
have warm teaware.
oh warm, good. Okay, I'll get mine
Yes.
warm too. So you're ready to jump right into
Yeah,
it.
I am.
Do you want to do them one at a time or do you want to do them at the same time?
We can do them at the same time. I think that would be a lot of fun, actually. I think that would be really
Okay.
interesting to really compare the terroir.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
because yeah, the terroir is extremely different
yeah,
in this case. But the style of tea, the look of the tea, I don't know if you've opened them up and looked at them,
I
but
have, and I'm happy to show them off. So the on my stream here, so the Cholo TSF BOP1 is this tea here. This is what this looks like. This is the tea from Africa. If I can get the lighting to look okay. It's a fairly broken grade tea, as we have mentioned. I don't know why I said that. I meant to say it. The leaves are very broken.
it's broken.
It's broken.
It's been having a lot of anxiety lately.
Same. I feel this tea on a very emotional level. So this is the Vengeti Pekoe, which is the Sri Lankan tea that we're trying here. So,
and that translates that word Vengeti Pekoe. Well, Pekoe, we know that word, right?
true.
You've heard that
Well,
word.
yeah.
Orange Pekoe, everybody's favorite flavor of tea.
I remember the first time I tried that, and everybody going, "Oh, that's an orange flavored tea. That's so cool." And I'm like, "Wait, but it doesn't taste like orange." I felt betrayed.
It's orange Pekoe refers to the leaf grade. So orange Pekoe is actually in the name of this TSFBOP.
Right.
That's the OP at the end
That's the
of this.
Tippy what? Okay, can you just what is it?
Yeah, I think it's Tippy Special Flowery
Broken.
orange Pekoe, 1 being like the first grade, so like the highest grade of that style. So if there was a 2 after, it'd be a lower grade of that style.
Yeah.
That's what that acronym means. And so yeah, the Pekoe in the same case here. The Pekoe is like the 2 leaves in a bud. It's like the combination of the leaves and the buds. It indicates that there's going to be buds there. And
Everything is fine.
Vengeti means thieves. So it basically just means thieves tea.
Thieves tea.
Thieves.
Oh,
That's
okay.
exciting. That's mysterious. Yeah.
I'm already really into that.
It's a really great story. I'm very happy and proud to share that story because it's one of the unique, charming things about this garden where the tea comes from. And we'll get into that when the time is right. I'll definitely share those stories. And I have videos of how this tea is made too. So we'll get to see it. How do they get it so small yet so sweet? Because usually, like even like an expert tea buyer, if they see the leaf looking like this, like broken up like this, they would probably just discount it, like discredit it. Like this is probably not going to be good. But both of these teas are actually very mild and very good.
One of my interestingly, okay, I will put a pin in that thought and we'll come back to that one. Something that somebody said to me one time when I was kind of first getting into tea. I was in a Discord. I was sharing a picture of some like Longjing that I was drinking, right? And it was a fairly broken Longjing. The leaves like looked really nice when they were dry, but you know, as they got wet, you could tell that they were pretty cut, and they looked chopped was the thing about it. And somebody asked me where I got it from, you know, and I told them, and they said, "Oh, well, it looks a little bit too cut up for my taste." And that was something that was really interesting, and that actually shaped my opinion of tea for quite a while, and of broken teas. And I just assumed that, if it's broken leaf, if it's cut leaf or whatever, like that must be bad. And what I found is that in green tea, sometimes that can kind of not be great, you know, when you got broken leaf, but specifically in the black tea, and I remember with the Yankee teas that we were drinking, they were broken after processing, and so that bitterness didn't come out the same as how you kind of explained that to me, which made a little bit of sense, I guess.
Yep.
And something that I've learned since kind of meeting you and getting and doing some of this podcast is that broken tea literally is not a quality signal at all. Like it can definitely influence the way it tastes for sure.
Mm.
Like in the green teas that I've had, but for at least these black teas, that's really not the case at all.
Yeah.
Um,
But no, I do support the statement that generally most broken teas are rubbish.
True. Yeah, I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm just saying that blanketly,
Yeah,
you shouldn't. Yeah.
assume that immediately.
Yeah.
You should give the tea a taste, but be mindful, be cautious. Like if you're sampling a bunch of broken grades, you may want to have a spittoon handy because
Yes.
they can be intense. They can be intense.
They can be very intense.
Yeah, it's all the tannins. It's just tannin,
Yeah.
because there's two ways that tannins are, well, can be limited in a tea, and tannins, unless they're balanced, don't do really well in tea. And so the first one is, shading and protecting the plant because that'll stop the tannins from being produced in the first place.
True.
And then the second thing that you can do is in processing, and that's keeping the leaf intact. Um, and both of these teas are broken during processing, and so
Hmm.
that's what's kind of confusing. And I don't know the magic trick of how they stop these to become too tannic. um, and I'll show you video of, especially the Vangeli Pecco. I have a lot of video that we took when we went there and asked them specifically about this tea because it's a really popular tea on our catalog. All right, I'm sure you already steeped. I've just I warmed my
Oh,
wares.
I'm
I'm
about to
just
decant now.
You're gonna decant. Okay, cool. Well, you can get a head start. That's fine. I'm not. That's cute.
Like just off the decanting, I can smell like chocolate and coffee almost.
Yummy. Everybody likes chocolate and coffee. Actually, I take that back. I've realized there's a lot of people that don't like the smell of coffee.
They're wrong, but that's fine.
That was a fast one, Colin. They're wrong.
So based off like as far as like the liquor goes off my first one here, this Vangeli Pico is much darker actually. It's like a bright like a deep ruby red color. It
Hmm.
looks a little brown on my camera, unfortunately, which always sucks. But
Going in for the taste.
no, I was just giving the lids a sniff. I'm gonna let them cool a little bit. I've learned recently that drinking your tea scalding hot is actually really bad for you. So I um, uh, have decided that I need to start letting it cool off. But so yeah,
That's a good idea.
yeah.
I judged a tea brewing competition in 2017 in Shanghai, and one of the criteria that we had to judge them on was the temperature at which they served us the tea. There was a whole bunch of criteria. It was a really cool competition actually, where you had to guess the tea, guess its terroir, and describe it to the judges as you're brewing it for them, and brew it to the best recipe that you can. And even the temperature of the tea served was noted, so you couldn't have it too hot. um, and you had to prime your cups, but you couldn't, you had to empty your cups out immediately before putting the tea in, so the cup is still hot. Because if you waited longer than 10 seconds after you put hot water into the cup to warm it,
Sure.
if you pour that water out and the cup is sitting there for 20-30 seconds, then it's losing temp, and so you get docked on that. But then the tea itself, when it got served, needed to be the right temp. So there's a couple of ways to address that, if you want to get that detailed in your tea service. And sometimes like having, the wider cup with more surface area is one of those ways, because there's more surface area. So even when you pour it in here, it's going to lose temperature faster,
Mm-hmm.
like if it's really hot. Or having like the large pitcher, those large pitch. That's one of the reasons. It's not so that you can put more tea in it, but it's just
It stays
the
hot a
extra
little longer.
No, it cools faster.
Oh, it cools. Oh, true. Yeah, you're right.
The more surface area will cool it faster.
I took the information you were giving me, and my brain went backwards and spat it back out. um. So that's I have like a few different sets of cups, and I'm using my Ruyao cups tonight because I like to use those with my darker teas. But when I'm making there are certain teas that I'm making, if like I'm making them at like boiling, where I'll get out like the larger cups that I have that are like nearly 100 milliliter cups, and they're like super wide and flat because my tea will cool off much more evenly and much more quickly, and
Yeah,
I can drink it faster.
that makes a difference.
It does. But,
Hmm.
all right, so what can you tell me? What tea do you want to talk about first? I guess we're gonna drink them both, but what do you want to talk about first?
Well, I mainly want to talk about the Vanghetti Pecco.
Sure.
That's my favorite, and I do have a lot of video that we can take a look at. Now, what these teas would be good for
Mm-hmm.
in the commercial setting, or just in your personal life setting, these make for really good iced teas.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, especially this TSFBOP1. The majority of the distribution of this tea goes to restaurants and cafes, to be used as iced tea, and also as a base blending ingredient for like a breakfast blend. These are, really punchy, really intense, and you can see the color. My colors came out super dark. And yeah, it does look like the Vanghetti Pecco here, the one on the right, is more orangey in color.
Say I did about a 30-second steep on each of them, and I've got like both of them are like this kind of deep ruby color,
Mm-hmm.
with the TSFBOP one being just slightly lighter with like maybe like a hint of orange. Oh,
Okay, cool.
all right.
Drink up.
I'm going. Which one are you drinking first?
I'm doing the Vanghetti Pecco
Yep,
first,
you're right.
but
You're right. You literally just said that.
we don't have to drink it in that order.
Oh my.
Oh my my my. This tea always surprises people.
So bear with me here.
Okay.
There's like a taste, a flavor to this that's almost like reminiscent of Chaud.
Okay.
In the there's a
Earthiness?
yeah, and it's not super tannic, which is wild. But it's got this like kind of round bottom to it. I always feel like flavor comes in like almost like this like kind of ball, right? And like there's like this like bottom to it that's like super round and full. That gives it that full body punch that I think you're talking about without bringing tannin to it. It still
Yeah.
fills my mouth, and maybe that's because of my like ratio to steep compared to yours, but I don't know what do you
No, I'm having the exact same experience. What's so surprising about this tea, first of all, yeah, is the lack of tannins. That always freaks people out because they look at that. I mean, you look at this wet leaf, it's all kinds of broken up. It's super deep in color. You would just assume that this is super tannic.
It looks
Um,
like something that would come in a tea bag, honestly.
yeah, it looks like something that would come in a tea bag. Exactly right. And that's the thing about broken grades is that yeah, usually they are in a tea bag, and usually they are pretty crappy in quality. But um, this one surprises you.
Yeah.
But then it also has this like really roundness to it. That was a good way that you described it. I like that. And since you've said it, now I'm like really noticing on the bottom of my palate kind of this widening of sensation underneath the palate. You know, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times Huigan, when we're talking about Huigan, that feeling is coming from the throat over the top of the palate.
Sure.
But this is actually kind of rounding out the bottom of the palate. Like I wouldn't necessarily assign Huigan to this tea. It's not quite there.
No.
Um,
Maybe
but
in.
it's
I was just gonna say maybe if we re-steeped it, it might, if the leaves open up. But I could see it
yeah.
being there. But sorry, I cut you off.
It's a challenge with the broken grades. Now, this same exact factory or the same exact farm, they make normal OP1, Orange Pecco 1, so
Sure.
it's not broken. It's just normal hand rolled. That one has Huigan. That's a beautiful tea that has Huigan. And so that's when you taste those two teas side by side, then you really um, can tell the difference of how masticating the leaf does affect the texture of the tea, and that's the tannins, because the tannins, they denature enzymes, and the main enzyme, uh, well, enzymes are flavor. Enzymes are amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
So one way I like to tell people to get them to remember that amino acids are associated with soft texture in umami is like liquid aminos, you know, which have become very popular as a cooking ingredient. Do you know about that?
No, I don't. And I
I'm
also didn't.
surprised.
It was just now learned that amino acids have anything to do with umami. So,
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Good, good, good. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so your umami is all amino acids. Amino acids have like they're proteins. Think about protein. Think about like the protein when you bite into meat. That
sure.
tastes and feels a lot different than when you bite into a lettuce that doesn't really have any protein to it. So, you know, the proteins do constitute a big part of texture, of thickness. And umami is actually like, even though umami is our fifth taste sensation that we call it's not really to do with taste. It's more to do with texture. It's more to do with like that
Sure.
thickness that just like coats your whole palate.
So I think about gyokuro.
That's umami.
Right, and I think about how I've had a couple different kinds now, a couple different cultivars, and yeah, the same type of thing happens there, where that like umami bomb like fills your mouth, and it's like broth, like chicken broth almost, and it like coats your mouth and stuff in kind of a similar type of way, I would say. And this kind of I think is something that's interesting too, because this is mildly off topic, and I'm just gonna go for it here real quick, because
Yeah.
my parents are vegan, right? They're
Okay.
plant based. I was vegetarian for a while when I was younger, and something that I always remember when I ate meat again was that I suddenly felt like because I would feel full when I was done eating, if I wasn't eating meat, but how satisfied I felt instead, and I feel like there's like a similar kind of relation between like a typical green tea to like a gyokuro, is just that like satisfying feeling. But anyway, back to black tea real fast. You were saying we were
um,
talking about amino acids and tannins and stuff.
yeah, no, but that's important. It's important. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, if your parents are vegan, I'm surprised that you don't know about liquid aminos because,
Oh, they're not into the science thing. They just.
well, it's like something at health food stores where you go buy your vegan food, your vegan ingredients. Like, that's a main ingredient that can provide umami to your diet, which when you're vegan, it's kind of hard to find that umami
Sure.
because it's kind of lower in protein, which is protein. So liquid aminos for the most part are extracted from like mushrooms. Um, it's MSG. It's MSG.
God bless
That's why
MSG.
MSG makes things taste good because
Ugh,
it plays with the amino acids to give them more vibrancy.
God
But
bless MSG.
the tannins, the tannins are scientists call them the most powerful bioweapons in the world because they denature amino acids. And we may not care about that because that's on such like a molecular level and really wouldn't make sense. But for a tea leaf, it's a big deal,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it will totally cut through any type of um, umami or texture that the or sweetness that the tea may have. Also, L-theanine is an amino acid, so tannins will also kill L-theanine.
Which makes so much more sense why tea drunkenness does not happen from like bagged tea because of
Yeah.
the tannin and like the lack
Mm-hmm.
of L-theanine and that being related. Yep. Okay. Wow, Elyse, I'm. How long have we been recording? We've been literally live for 30 minutes, and I like my mind has been blown like times.
Oh, that makes me feel good. You know, I have these kind of moments too. Sometimes I have these moments by myself when I'm live streaming, and I'm just like, oh, and now this makes sense. All these things are adding up, you know, and this type of information is not in the conventional tea education.
True.
You know, even if you study tea in China, a lot of these concepts are they're not intellectualized. They're not talked about in scientific terms. They're talked about in very kind of overarching romantic terms, such as Huigan. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like that's and you know, when someone's talking about the quality of of a tea and talking about Huigan, a lot of times they're not. They're not talking about tannins or amino acids or you know any of the science type of stuff. So, um, yeah, definitely a lot of room for a book to be written.
Damn.
Would you like to see how this tea is made?
Yeah.
Cool.
Shall.
I'll give you a couple of if you want me to share screen for you for your
Yeah.
audience. We could do that. I'll give you time
I'm
to
also
do your
gonna
thing.
start drinking the
The other
other
one,
tea
cool.
as well. Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
do
yeah.
that. It's a good idea.
And I'm ready to go whenever. Just flip over whenever you are.
Okay.
Real quick, since we're kind of in a lull here, I have a question from my chat about Wagon. Basically,
Okay.
Mizzou Murphy here is asking what Wagon is. I'm gonna spell it in the chat here.
Thank
And
you.
as I understand, it literally translates to returning sweetness. It's related to like the finish of the tea, but has a little bit kind of more ambiguous meaning to that. I think you would be better equipped to explain that in
Oh
more
no, that's
detail.
exactly it. That's
Oh,
exactly it.
oh,
It's not that complicated. It's that. It's returning sweetness. It is much more of a textural sensation than anything else.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Say it's kind of like when you swallow your tea, you know, and you feel like that kind of aftertaste in your throat, and then that kind of like flavor starts to come back, basically.
okay, so this is the metal, a mortar and pestle that is used in processing this. This is the traditional method of making this tea. So you see the raw green leaf is in there. That's raw. There was just a little bit of withering that was applied to the leaf, but for the most
Sure.
part, it's still very wet leaf and it's just being masticated in this. And they'll do this for a while until it's broken into little pieces. Um, I wanted to show you this video before telling you why this tea is called thieves tea. The
Yeah.
reason why it's called thieves tea is because this method of making the tea is actually the way that the workers of this area have been making the tea, and they work out in the tea field. So this Amba Tea Estate that this tea comes from is a now it's more of like a humanitarian type of project where they're rebuilding the community, and but before it was just a normal tea estate with you know indentured laborers there, and they would pocket tea. They would pocket tea to take home, and they would make this tea at home this way. They would just bang it all up until it was masticated into tiny little pieces and then just let it oxidize. Um, and they make this tea as like an homage to that story.
So,
You know, yeah.
and just a quick question. So the basically if I understand processing correctly, they break it up and then like leave it to allow it to oxidize. The
Yes.
breaking of it is essentially the similar process to like the rolling that would cause oxidation in I guess more orthodox tea sense, correct?
Yeah, the rolling, or in the case of CTC, crushed hair curl,
Yeah.
that would masticate the tea, but they use like a conveyor belt of like teeth that just like the tea all just gets
Yeah, that's
torn up into little pieces. Um,
but
but
the
here they're just doing it by hand, and it's a surprise though because they are breaking open all the cell walls and exposing all of the tannin if there is tannin there. So obviously, tannin is reduced.
that is
Now this is,
fascinating.
yeah, that's why like I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I can't fully explain why this doesn't have tannin. This is, you know, the leaf where this tea comes from. It's, you know, not particularly shaded. It is kind of like an agroforestry type of environment, so there is some kind of like natural intermittent shading coming from the canopy of trees in the agroforestry system. And the elevation here, it's like mid elevation. It's not a super high or super low. This looks like a good video that shows. Um, but yeah, this tea garden is just, oh, this is Lipton's seat. That's a very famous landmark in Sri Lanka.
Lipton
Lipton
seat?
seat. Yeah, it's called because of Lipton. You know,
Yeah.
Lipton, he got his start, or the company of Lipton, which was named after a man named Lipton. He got his start in Sri Lanka. That's where he started building his empire. And
Which
so
makes
a lot
sense.
of, yeah, a lot of landmarks and important places there are named after Lipton.
Wild.
So yeah. So that like landmark on the mountain, that like cliff, I'll show the video again so you can see that view again. But yeah, you see there's not like a whole lot of shading, but hey, you know, I was talking about organic soil. That's it. That's what you want
Oh
to
yeah,
look
I
for
was
with
literally just
organic
noticing.
soil.
I was literally
So
just noticing.
this is Lipton seat up there. That like little,
Is that a farm up there? Is that a
I don't know what's up there. I think they, when I was there, I asked them what it is, what's still up there, and they said, oh, it's just like a retired, there's a lot of retired tea gardens in Sri Lanka. There's a
interesting?
lot of them. So yeah, it may have been in one of Lipton's let me see here, this is,
Okay, not to completely distract from the Sri Lankan tea, but this the Malawi tea, the cholo is
mm-hmm.
also not very tannic. It still has that kind
Yep.
of same like roundness of like the chopuer, but not quite. It's not nearly as strong as the Sri Lankan.
Yeah, it's not as strong, it's not as character, like it kind
No,
of falls flat
very much so.
compared to the other tea. But I'll tell you what, it's like a fifth of the price.
Well, I was wondering.
Yeah, because even this Vangeli Pecco is it's highly valued. This garden, they only produce ever all of their teas are made by hand. They don't produce more than 12 kilos of tea a day. You know, I'll show you. This is an example of their whole leaf black tea that they make. Everything done very much by hand in small batches, high levels of quality control. A really cool thing that they employed here, once they turned into like a development project for the area,
Sure.
the tea estate had gone out of business, and then new owners from Europe bought it, and they wanted to treat it as like a co-op, you know, type of development project for the area. They recruited a woman who is now a tea grower in Scotland. Her name is Beverly Wainwright. She's quite famous. She was here at this place in Sri Lanka, I believe, for like 4 or 5 years, and she pretty much did all of the work of developing these hand processes, as well as like record keeping, quality control, and this very unique practice with labor, where and I hate calling it labor,
Right.
with the team, with the team, where every member of the team has to work every position within the entire organization, including management. So
Hmm.
in most tea processing operations, everything is very siloed. The labor is very
Sure.
siloed. So you have like the women out harvesting, and then the men work in the factory. And even within the factory, every employee just focus on their one thing that they just do really well. And then you've got the supervisor and the manager, and they're always doing their thing. But and here at AMBA, I think it's like every 2 weeks they have to rotate to a new position. This is their withering bed, so I just wanted to show it. This is the Vangeti Peko would go through the same withering like this here. This is very good way of doing withering. I mean, this
I
little
love
pile
those
here,
leaves.
this little pile there is not very great, but you see how like the rest of it is all like a thin layer, and
Yeah.
then the tray that it's on is a mesh, so there's airflow going all the way. Like that's really important with the withering. I was showing you with the Yankee Tea Factory the first week, their withering trough. They
Right.
call it a trough because they want like a thick layer of leaves so they can produce more. But then you get uneven withering, uneven processing. So this type of system is really good. Additionally, outdoor withering, which is really how the true artisans do it. So like,
But that's,
oolong.
leaves you up at the whim of the elements, so I can imagine that there's kind of a hesitation there.
Um, yeah, and then they use just a normal dryer. Let me see if I can get a video of it. Here it is. This is the dryer. This is like a normal oven dryer, but everything is like very small scale processing. So they can't really produce large scale. See, like that's the dryer. That's it. It's quite small. They can only fit a couple trays in there, so they can't be producing very large batches, which is why this Vangeti Peko is so valuable. See how much can fit in there. That's it. That's the whole dryer there. It's quite small. That's probably one of the smallest dryers of anybody that we work with.
Say that looks like fewer than 20 trays per side.
Yeah, it's really small. But they're quite fine. Beverly, when she spent her time there, this is her. Let's see. She's from Scotland, and she has a lot of contacts in Europe. So in addition to setting up all of the quality processing, she also set up a lot of their marketing and product position. They're in all of the highest end department stores in London. Yeah, they're the fancy tea in Europe. This garden. So
Oh
they
wow.
don't. Yeah, they don't have to rely on large commodity sales. They only work on these like artisanal hand processed thing, and literally the price of their teas is 3 to 4 times more than all other teas. Like between these two, I mean, this cholo, the one that you just were talking about, just drinking, that one is super cheap. It's so cheap. The shipping costs more than the tea. It's that cheap. And we work to get cheaper shipping because we do bulk importing. But the Vangeti Peko is quite pricey. So like I don't sell a lot of it, but I don't need to. Like if I did find big buyers for it, if I came to AMBA, they'd be like, "Hey, look at our capacity. We wouldn't even be able to do a ton if that order came." And I think that's great. I love this. I love seeing these organizations leaning into the smaller scale
Yeah.
versus in the case with Satembwa, the cholo tea that we're tasting, they have they're kind of straddling the two worlds. All right, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna turn the screen share off. They're straddling the two worlds. They are in a very similar position as Ambati Estate, where they are kind of a failed estate, like financially not, sustainable for the workers and for the land. And the owners want to flip things around and do something better. So at Satembwa, what they're doing is they have like a hybrid line where part of their production does go towards like quality tea like this, and then majority of their production is still going towards CTC. And it's understandable why a
Right.
garden would want to do that, because that's like what they've known. That's the business contacts they already have.
Sure.
That's, you know, they already have the factory for it. But the profit margin on that style of tea is just so, so low. And it just puts so much pressure on you. And, you know, it can get in the way of not only the quality control of like the higher quality artisanal teas that you're making, because they do both, they have like a multiple factory thing, but it also affects their brand, because like they do have cheap tea, they do sell $2 a kilo tea that
Jeez.
anybody can get. And for, you know, people that are in business and like as buyers and facing their own margin struggles, may be more attracted to the lower price tea without giving the credit that's due for, you know, the more artisanal craft
Sure. Yeah.
that goes into it.
Say, I mean, at the end of the day, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. So, like, let's go for the least expensive thing on the market, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense because, like, at the end of the day, the dilemma seems very similar to, like, somebody that, you know, is a photographer or is a videographer. I speak from experience. In that you really want to just make your art, you know, you want to make the good stuff, the cool stuff, the fun stuff, but at the end of the day, you also have to do something that makes money. And if the CTC is what's making them money, so that they can start to work a little bit more on, or market a little bit more some of the higher quality teas, you know, then I think that that's the best way to do it, even if it's a slow road, I guess. But
Well, it's like so the photographer example, it would be such a vast contrast of like, I've been a commodity photographer for years now, and the hourly rate of that type of business is, you know, $15 an hour, let's say. Um, but then there's this opportunity to be like more artistic and higher quality and more thoughtful in your photography, but it would also require you to create like a new brand and a new, you know, market
yeah.
for it. But in that one, you can make, let's say, $200 an hour.
Mhm.
It's like that stark of a difference. And it'd be like choosing, okay, well, I'm just gonna like tiptoe into this $200 an hour thing and, you know, start to do it and put myself out there for that. But I'm gonna continue to do this $15 an hour thing because I already have clients that have already booked me, and I'm gonna just do it. And that $15 an hour gig, like as long as you continue to make yourself available, like you're gonna continue to be hired, and it's gonna
Yes.
continue to distract you from, you know, putting yourself out there for getting those $200 an hour clients. Yeah, I mean, I
It's
think
a
that would
it's
be a good comparison.
it's a double-edged sword, and like my original example is like, you know, hey, this is beneficial, but at the same time, like, you're right in that, like, there are downsides to the whole thing, and it's kind of this, again, I feel like the conversation has turned back to being in the tea industry is like constantly being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Why do we always come back here?
We gotta change this. We're gonna change it one TikTok at a time, Colin. Come on.
One podcast episode at a time.
We'll do it. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And you know what? It may not be our doing that's gonna cause it to happen. You know, it may just be an issue of scarcity, an issue
Yeah.
of economics in the market. And I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast, but I'm going to talk about it over and over again because it's not talked about enough, and it's very current and very, very relevant to what we're dealing with right now. But with the pandemic and all of the logistics challenges that have been coming, you know, mostly from China. It's mostly the exports from China. There's like such a huge demand for exports from China because we love Walmart.
Whee!
And the pandemic has only grown that exponentially
Mhm.
as like we're sitting at home and shopping on Amazon, and all of Amazon is even worse than Walmart. It's all coming from China. And
I'm guilty of it too, though. You know,
it's
it is,
okay. I'm not
yeah.
trying to shame
No,
anybody.
it is what it is. Like, it's just that's the, again, There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to brand this podcast as like super like socialist, but I'm just saying. Sorry, go on.
Let's be careful of that, Colin. Anytime I start talking in that area, I start getting called a Marxist, and it's like, and you're insulting me how? Anyway, yeah, so there's been an increased demand for exports from China that has put a huge pressure on containers, like the quantity of
Sure.
containers. There's not enough containers, and China wants them, and they're valuing those containers. So it's actually become profitable for freight companies to send empty containers to China, so that China can have containers for their exports. So from here, from Vietnam, from Japan, even from Europe, a lot of ships are sending empty containers back to China. And so that's creating delays in other countries. And so pretty much the entire supply chain right now is in a state of chaos. And
Jesus.
no one really wants to talk about it. Like the press doesn't want to talk about it. The banks don't want to talk about it because not only would people potentially like freak out and hoard.
Like we saw with toilet paper?
Yes, because that's what people do.
Mm-hmm.
But it could actually also affect the stock market because, then people would be afraid that the market's going to collapse, which that's pretty smart to think. But of course, the banks and the Wall Street, they don't want people thinking that. They want people thinking everything is okay.
True.
And so what does all of this have to do with tea? Well, in the problem that we were just talking about is when scarcity happens, when your balance of supply and demand starts to go off, if your supply goes down, but your demand is still where it's at or higher, that causes the price to go up. And these cheap things are no longer going to be cheap. And that's going to change the entire culture around consumerism. And the valuable things like this tea here, the price of this thing is not affected at all because even if logistics costs go up, and speaking of, the logistics costs have gone up because of the shipping container issue. If you really want your shipping container to go out, you want to prioritize in the line and really get your container out. It used to cost about $4,000 for a 40-foot container to ship from China here, not inclusive of clearing fees or whatever, but just the container costs. It's not per kilo. It's just the whole container. Whatever you can fill in there, you can put it in there. It's $4,000. Put it on a ship and it goes. Right now, it costs over $30,000. It costs over $30,000 to ship a container right now.
Jesus.
From China. So when your tea, right? So you think about like some cheap Chinese tea, you're paying $4,000 for the whole container. That's potentially 20 tons of tea. Like that's like pennies per kilo to ship the tea.
Sure.
That's what Walmart is used to working within those kinds of margins. And then all of a sudden it costs over 30,000 to ship it. And that's going to increase your logistics cost too much.
Yeah, that's a huge increase.
30,000, yeah, 30,000, and it's only going to go up higher. And it's not going to change. This problem's not going anywhere. I started talking about this problem last year already, and like at first people were like, "Oh, don't worry, it's just temporary. It's just temporary." And I'm like, "Well, hey, we're a year in, and the problem is just getting worse." So like, scarcity is going to become a real thing, and it's really going to affect our perception of the products that for the most part we kind of take for granted. We're not going to be able to take for granted anymore.
You just thrown a lot of numbers and figures at me, and like my head is spinning all of a sudden.
It's a lot. This is what you get for inviting a business person on your podcast.
Yeah, seriously. This is what's so funny to me is that like this that explanation there like was like this perfect example of like how your brain works. I feel like that's like just this really good example of you, Elyse. And I'm sitting here going, okay, all of this makes sense to me. None of this is going to be retained.
It's okay. We'll talk about it again next week.
Yeah, we probably will. So So, okay, so tea is expensive. This tea is expensive. Shipping is expensive. There's a scarcity on containers.
Mhm.
Damn.
Yeah.
What is
So
there to
you're
look
going to
forward
start to
to?
see it. I mean, they've already, prices in the grocery store have already gone up. Like, that's not a surprise. I don't know if you've noticed that, but a lot of people have started noticing that. And, you know, a lot of companies are still in this position of thinking that this is temporary. And so they're justifying like taking financial losses, you know, just to keep everything status quo. But there's going to be a point where they're going to be like, no, we can't do this anymore, price going up. And it could be a really big price increase, but it's needed, you know. Sri Lanka, you know, we're talking about Sri Lanka here. It's a struggling tea industry. That's why there are a lot of retired tea estates because they just it's not profitable anymore. Like the
Sure.
cost of tea, like even if you've got like the fanciest Ceylon tea, which by the way, Ceylon is one of those terms that's questionably canceled. I don't know. We want to talk about that or not? We can.
I'm always so confused on that.
Ceylon means Sri Lanka, but it's kind of like an Orientalism type of a term.
Do we want to talk about that real fast?
We could, yeah, we could talk about it. I mean,
Because
I don't know if
I'm clueless on that. I only know that Ceylon is Sri Lanka and that is it.
yeah. So it was a term that was assigned to Sri Lanka when it got colonized, and it was kind of like a romanticized marketing term. There is some actually there's not a connection to like ancient Sri Lankan history of Ceylon being connected to it. I think the actual connection is somewhere else, and I want to be right, so I'm going to look it up. Um, but it's definitely just like a marketing term that was applied to Sri Lankan products in the international market. Um, of course, during colonialism, because we know Sri Lanka got
Colonized.
colonized. Yeah. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of like one of those words like Oriental beauty is one of those, you know, words. Okay, it comes from Ceylon, of the island that was known by the Romans. See, it wasn't even like a Sri Lankan word. The Romans as serendipitous, serendip. So it's like like serendipity. It's like a positive word, but it was like a Roman word. It was like a well-known, famous like Roman island that was known to be like beautiful and exotic and perfect. And so when they colonized Sri Lanka, like that word, this idea of this like special exotic island was applied to Sri Lanka. So it doesn't even have like ancient Sri Lankan roots.
Elise, if I didn't live in an apartment building right now, I'd be screaming.
But it's Orientalism. It's exactly that. So if we want to be proper, we cancel that word. I mean, and it's not even our business to really cancel it, but like it's not going to hurt us to do that, like in our own efforts of being educators and talking about these things, like
Yeah.
um
I just
but you know it's interesting, there's a guy on TikTok, I don't know if you've come across him. He's a Sri Lankan man that makes chai.
yes, love
He's
this man.
awesome.
Love
Yeah, I
this
like him
man
too.
because and the reason I love him so much, A, the content is great.
Yeah.
B, it's the way he always makes it a perfect loop
Uh-huh.
that makes me so happy. So goddamn happy. But yeah, I guess
But yeah, he used the term Ceylon. He uses the term Ceylon, and I asked him because I know it's not my place to educate him on this. It's not
sure.
my place to do that. It's his place to discover it for himself.
Or to
And
educate
I
us.
and to educate us exactly. So like I put in the comments, I said, can you please explain the origin of the word Ceylon? As a T student, I've tried to understand this word, but there's only limited information on the internet.
Sure.
Can you help me? And he wrote back to me, good question. And so I figured that he would have created some content around it, but he didn't. So that didn't really work the way that I wish it would have, because I mean that's how you deal with this, is like you ask questions versus like gatekeeping or whatever. You ask questions, um, but 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 yeah.
Yeah. camera just shook, and apparently it's bath time for my cat. She likes to sleep underneath the camera, and it shakes when she moves.
So is bath time like punishment for the cat? Is that what that meant?
Oh no, as in she's bathing herself.
Oh, I see. Like licking herself and knocking the stuff.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So yeah, that's that. We want to decolonize tea. That's the actions that we can do, and like bringing this conversation up, especially with people that like that's their culture. That's their story to tell. That's their education to give to the world. And that's like the nature of his content.
Mm-hmm.
Like even though he talks about chai, he always does it where he tells stories of like his culture. And,
Sure. Yeah.
but yeah, he uses that term Ceylon, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not the right person to gatekeep this for him, but like, I'll just ask him and see if he can help us out. Maybe I should hit him up again and be like, hey, I'm really serious about this. I'll send you a bunch of really nice tea if you if you could help me with this.
And just so I don't know how much longer we're gonna go here, but I at least have one more thing I want to just kind of mention on that, because something that I think is really important in that is yesterday I had my stream with Jesse, from Jesse's Tea House, and we were kind of talking a little bit about I got on my soapbox again, and one of my big soapboxes in regards to tea that I've kind of like come across here is that I don't appreciate when the tea is described in Western terms, like specifically like, hey, this tastes like this kind of wine, or like tasting tea is like tasting wine, or anything like that, because it's bullshit. And this to me, and that whole conversation of Ceylon versus Sri Lanka, and who's allowed to kind of have that discussion of what's right, who's allowed to gatekeep that, the use of that word, yada yada, kind of makes me think of this in the tea specifically. We have this need, it seems, in the Western context to clarify everything that is not Western in Western terms, and I don't, and I it's something that I'm trying with my best to kind of get over, is just that anything that's not Western is not incorrect because it's not Western, right? And specifically in regards to tea, like there are whole wars fought around tea. There are diplomatic trade routes built around tea. There are roads that are still around today that were built on, tea trade routes. And I feel like the same thing kind of applies here with this conversation that we're having about Ceylon versus Sri Lanka, and that like our Western view of this thing does not need to be taken into account for this like struggle or this issue or this concept or anything like that to be legitimate. And it's just, I don't know, just something I'm kind of thinking about in regards to that. Kind of made me think on those lines. So
yeah, so hopefully somebody listens to this podcast and gets inspired and decides they're gonna educate us, which would be great. It's not our place, but what is our place? To control our own behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So like as a merchant that sells tea from Sri Lanka, I have made the conscious decision that I've canceled that word, for myself.
At least on your shop. Yeah,
at least on my shop. I know I brought it up in this podcast, but I know that that's a topic that is important to you and you want to talk about. But you don't see me regularly in my content gatekeeping that type of stuff. Like if someone asks, and hopefully like the answer can come directly from the source or directly from somebody that, is from that experience or from that culture. Yep.
I've got an interesting question here, actually. So isn't putting it in Western terms just an attempt to not gatekeep it, make it easier for different people to understand so that they can learn more of the traditional history and terminology? And I think my initial kind of reaction to that is more that I understand what you're saying, in that like if you're like if we're talking about like the introduction of the concept, like if we want to say, oh, like this tea reminds me of like a red wine, so that somebody can understand like, oh yeah, I've tasted a red wine. Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that. I mean more along the context of like when I, started to really learn more about tea, I had a lot of people that would come into my shop say, oh, so, like, I bet that's a lot like wine, and tea has a lot of similarity to wine, because you'd mentioned terroir, and they go, oh, just like wine and stuff. I'm like, well, like tea is its own thing. So I just mean more that like it doesn't need to be like wine to be legitimate, because that's like the most common. But like if you wanted to say Also, just saying this tastes like red wine is not helpful. Tell me what kind of red wine. So, but I don't know. Elyse, what do you think?
Yeah, because like there's a lot of different red wines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like saying this tastes like tea.
Yeah, that's yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know, but that was an interesting question. That was an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about this. I'm very conflicted, and still trying to wrap my head around because like we're in the thick of it. We're in the middle of it
Into
as
the thick of it.
educators. All right, I see a TikTok coming up. We got to update our TikTok game
Oh yeah, I need to
out
get back
there.
on that grind.
Yeah, I've been spending too much time on this other live streaming app that I'm abandoning TikTok. But yeah, we're in the thick of like educating and talking about these subjects, and of course, we could completely evade the whole thing. We really could, and just say, not our. What do they say that? Not
Not
my
my
monkeys,
baby.
not my circus. I don't
Oh, my friends always said, "Not my baby, not my problem."
know.
I guess that tells who the type of people we hang out with.
Yeah, I hang out with circus performers and you hang out with a bunch of baby daddies. Cool. Got it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's not their baby. They're not baby daddies. I got it. Got it. Got it. Got
We're tramping through the tea, on and on and on we steep.
it. Yes, yes. Yeah, so like we could evade it and everything would be fine for the most part. Most tea companies are completely evading it. That's why you're not hearing most tea company. I mean, when was the last time you heard Lipton talking about colonization? I mean, of course not. They're not going to address it. Like,
They have only benefited from it, so they would never.
yeah, they would never talk about it. But even some companies like my own have had taken the choice of like I'm just here selling my tea and I'm not going to get involved. They say it's all politics, and I'm like, no, this is not politics. This is civility, and civility is like completely different than politics. We're talking about how we can be nice to each other. We're not talking politics.
Civility.
Yeah, civility.
Okay, I'm tea drunk. I'm sorry.
um, but if we do choose to engage with this discourse and contribute to it, we have to be really cautious about how to proceed and make sure that we are amplifying the right voices and
Yeah.
not speaking over. And for me, that's been a big struggle over the past few months because I've found myself not publicly, but in intimate conversations with the like highly acute experience and knowledge that I have about these cultural subjects. Um, yeah, kind of over speaking and realizing, but these are intimate conversations with friends, so it's like there's space for back and forth, and it's really hard because sometimes people don't want to have to do that work for learning their own culture.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't want to hear it from a white girl.
So yeah, I something that I struggle with sometimes making tea like this, and making content around it is like I'm a white boy. Like is this and I don't say that with like the like somebody tell me it's okay, like it is, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think that as long as there is understanding that this is not my culture, um, and appreciating that culture that this practice that I enjoy comes from is more important than anything else. By doing stuff like this, by making the tea talks, by doing the stream, where I when I make tea, I make sure to talk about the tea, talk about where the tea comes from, and then also making these podcasts. And I think that ultimately, because something that I think gets talked about a lot is when you have a platform, you should use it.
Yeah.
And so, my platform may be relatively small in comparison to others. However, that doesn't mean it can't grow. And I figure you and I are in a unique position where we live in a time where we have access to the technology necessary. And so why not share this story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And ideally, you know what? Now that we've had this talk, the next time we have tea from Sri Lanka and we talk about Sri Lanka, I'm gonna have the guy from Amba Estate phone in, video call in. Yep. And we'll ask him we'll let him explain it.
Yeah.
And I will discuss it with him beforehand, so that way, um, because sometimes like these issues that we're talking about culture and respect, it's kind of weird. And like it's something that, like, as Americans that are like in the thick of it, like trying to navigate this and how to be friendly with each other, it's hard for us to understand. But like in Asia, like in Sri Lanka, like it's a non-issue there.
Hmm.
Like they don't understand, like, why are you pissed off about cultural appropriation? Like, we're not pissed off, we're happy to see you practicing our culture and respecting our culture. And it's like, well, like there's a different viewpoint here that's not being considered. For the most part, it's like the diaspora of people that are actually like struggling and
Yeah.
and kind of leading this discourse. Because yeah, people in Sri Lanka, like in Sri Lanka, you do not see things called as Ceylon. Like I think the word has like kind of retired, and then even when it's always just been really applied to tea,
Yeah.
because tea was the main, international export. And so that term was really only assigned to tea. So like in Sri Lanka, people living their day to day there, like they don't care at all about Ceylon. They probably never even hear that word, or.
Say it has no significance, and that was something I was
Mm-hmm.
actually gonna mention and ask about too. Was just and you answered it there. Was just yeah. I've never seen that term outside of tea. I don't
Yeah,
think
it was
ever.
definitely a marketing term. It
Yeah.
was really just a marketing term,
Well,
that's still stuck. And
say the Twinings bag is Ceylon orange Picot.
yeah,
Like that's a marketable title, and especially with the context of that, if you understood that at the time that blend was being released, what Ceylon referred to culturally, historically, like that. Yeah, I don't, that's yeah, that's I have nowhere else to go with it. That is all I'm saying.
yeah. But I've never heard a Sri Lankan person offended by the word. I've only heard white people commenting on the history.
Yeah.
And so there's validity to that. But I would like to hear it from somebody, like once they do their own research and realize, oh yeah, we need to reclaim this whole thing and do it the way that we want to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a very interesting discourse going around on TikTok right now around a woman in Hong Kong that made a video, talking about how Asian people don't understand cultural appropriation, and if they see somebody, wearing their like a white person wearing their cultural garb, like they actually like that. Um,
Hmm.
and the discourse in return has been Asian Americans speaking up and saying, hey, well, like that's your perspective, but our perspective is very different. And like we have to deal with being an outsider and being like
A
not considered
novelty.
truly Asian by Asians in Asia. And it's like, but we are still, and this is still our culture. Like, we still grow up in our homes learning the language and learning the culture. Like it still is our culture. And we get ostracized for practicing our culture. But then someone else practices it and they get celebrated. Like that's the key there, and that's why it's really important. As like we are sitting here drinking tea, I mean, I'm not to say that we're being celebrated right now, but like it's cool. People would say, oh, this is cool what you're doing. um Someone in Asia, like or an Asian American or Sri Lankan American may feel differently. I don't know, maybe that's not the right example, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing, and we're taking it on, Colin. It's
We're doing our best.